Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Work Hard, Invest Harder podcast. I'm your host, Justin Dixon, and I've got a really awesome guest on today, Jeffrey Donis with the Donis Investment Group. Super interesting guy. He's a young guy. He and his two brothers, one is a twin brother, quit college to focus on real estate full time. They started wholesaling and just really going after it. They then transitioned into multifamily back in 2021. They are co-GPs on 5 deals, one of which they found and led in Atlanta. We dig into how they set up a business between the three of them, what roles and responsibilities they do. And we talk a lot about the deal that they are in and the current state of the multifamily investing market. So really awesome episode. I think everybody will get a lot out of it. So let's get Jeffrey on the pod.
Do you love your job, but want other investment options than your company's 401k and trying to pick stocks? If so, you've come to the right place. In this podcast, you will get actionable information for your passive real estate investment journey. Welcome back to another episode of Work Hard, Invest Harder podcast. Here's your host, Justin Dixon.
All right, Jeffrey, welcome to the podcast. Happy to have you on, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Justin.
Yeah, so I guess let's just kind of jump right in. Maybe share a little bit about you and your background and how you kind of got started in this whole real estate game.
For sure. So I work with my two brothers. My name's Jeffrey Donis. Got started in real estate when I was 18. My twin brother is also my age, and my older brother is 24. So he's 3 years older than we are, and he got started when he was 21. To give you some background on us, we got started initially through wholesaling. We grew up with a single mother. She's from Guatemala originally. So she comes from very humble beginnings, and raising us and growing up in a single mom household, money was always scarce. So as soon as I turned 18, my older brother was fortunate enough to come across a video on YouTube that led him into wholesaling and what that was and how you can get into real estate with little to no money, which was where exactly we were at that time.
Right.
Sounded attractive, and eventually started reading a lot of books like Rich Dad Poor Dad and Think and Grow Rich and all these different entrepreneurship, I guess, foundational books that a lot of people read. So once I started getting into that sort of way of thinking, I was a college student at the time, as were my brothers, and eventually decided that school was something that, although I think it's very valuable, for us, it wasn't valuable at that time because we thought the time and effort that we'd spend going to class, we could spend learning more of a non-traditional educational, information that we can get on our own. So we took a leap of faith by leaving school to pursue real estate full time from that point on. And for that first year, we focused primarily on single family wholesaling and creative financing. And then after that first year, we transitioned into multifamily by joining a mastermind group called Think Multifamily. And since then, we've been able to be a part of 5 large apartment syndications. We each have our own role, and I'm happy to go into the rest, but that's a little high level as to what our background is.
No, lots to unpack there. And you and I have gotten to know each other through Think Multifamily and that coaching program. So it's been pretty cool to see you and your brothers, grow throughout the whole program, and leading deals and co-GP on deals and all that. So super, super exciting. So before you kind of jumped into real estate, I guess, so it sounds like your older brother was kind of the starting point with the real estate because he kind of found that YouTube video and kind of started the fire being lit underneath you guys. And I guess, how did that first kind of process go from, being like, let's look at YouTube and the wholesaling video and then, actually doing it and, talk through kind of those first couple of months, weeks, whatever that, you were, calling people and wholesaling deals?
Yeah. So for anyone in the audience that doesn't know what wholesaling is, it's simply finding a house. For us, that was a house. You can wholesale anything. So let's say we were cold calling homeowners, and typically they were in some type of distress. We were solving a problem. Obviously, we needed the property at a discount, and then we would attach on top of whatever price we would get it under contract for, we would put on top a assignment fee, which typically was $5,000 to $10,000 on average, and then you'd find an end buyer. So that's what we were doing. At first, it was different, right? We were all college full-time students, so I was putting about 2 hours a day on the Mojo dialer is what we used. It's a software where you can automatically dial numbers and reading books, listening to entrepreneurship podcasts, things like that.
Yeah.
So over time, we were getting deals and building a pipeline, learning what a CRM was, following up, kind of learning how to sell really while taking a lot of action. And it was an unfortunate event, COVID-19 pandemic, but for the 2020 pandemic. But for us, it was a blessing in disguise because we were all at our own respective universities. My twin brother was at Chapel Hill, which is a big university here. Older brother was at Greensboro, and I was at Wilmington. And now when the COVID hit, we were all forced to go home back under one roof. So instead of spending only 2 hours cold calling, we were now able to do closer to 6 to 8. And eventually it was pretty much every single day, 9 to 8 p.m. And our pipeline grew very quickly. So obviously when we left school, that was now full time. But at that point, it was like slowly school was becoming second position to the rest.
Yeah, you were like, oh, we're starting to make some money here. The school stuff is not as fun as it sounds, especially because you're at home, right? There's obviously the college experience that is outside of the school system, and getting to meet people and all of that. So, and you obviously weren't getting that during lockdown. So that's interesting. Because obviously there's two sides of the coin, right? You've got to find a house to buy at a discount, and then you've got to find buyers that are willing to buy the house. And these, I'm guessing, but maybe I'm wrong, these aren't typically like people that are buying these things aren't trying to buy their primary residence. It's more of an investment for them. Is that right? Typically? So how did you, obviously you can buy lists or whatever of people that are looking to sell their house or, just house, numbers and kind of get all that contact information. But how did you start to build your list of buyers? I think that's always kind of like interesting.
Yeah. And we learned all this by doing research on podcasts, but there's a lot of ways to find buyers. The first one that we used was Facebook groups. Simply type in a keyword in Facebook and it'll spit out a lot of groups that you can join. And then you just simply make the post. So we were doing that. And you can also pull lists of buyers. So if you were to go and look at tax records on a flipped house, you can go to Zillow and find houses that looked flipped. Typically, if they look flipped, they probably were by an investor. And if you have one right next door that was flipped to the one that you're looking to get under contract, you can just reach out to that person by skip tracing is the word to find out who is the owner of the LLC and call them and see if they'd be interested.
Got it. And so how did that kind of when did you start wholesaling? What was was it 2019?
Towards the end of 2019, going into 2020. And obviously there's like a bug. I had this bug and I still have it. And I think all my brothers were, blessed to have this ingrained in us where we come from a low income background. Our goal is to retire our mom. So that was where the fire was. And kind of skipped over the trip that we took to Guatemala the winter break of my freshman year, which is the year we got started. So that was in 2019 going into 2020. And we saw where my mom grew up. It was a very, very humble small village in Guatemala, about 3 hours from the city. And coming back from that trip was when we actually started, cold calling and all of that.
Right.
So I'm sorry. I just want to make sure I mentioned that. But what was your question?
No, I mean, that sounds like a very strong why. People talk about why they get into anything in their life, whether it's starting a business or real estate investing or whatever. And it sounds like your brothers all unified on this why of like, you saw where your mother grew up. So it's like, we want to make sure that we're providing, the best life possible that you can for her, because she's obviously done that for you guys. Right. So, the why is kind of helping to retire your mother, which I think is a super passionate and powerful, message and a unifying force for you and your brothers. Right.
Yeah. No, 100%. And it's still to this day, like, I don't know what your thoughts are on it, but just having that, like growing up the way we did, a lot of people would see it as something that's unfortunate, but I truly think not having anything given to us allows me to go and build it myself and have something to strive after. Obviously I'm very faithful. So like first and foremost that, but I think like I was blessed with the upbringing that we had or else I don't know where else I would have gotten that fire, and a fire so intense, Yeah.
I mean, you kind of saw where you came from, right? And now it's like, okay, well, I want to achieve maybe a higher standard of living or whatever. And so you just have this, like, nothing's going to be given to me. I've got to work my butt off to get whatever I want. And, you and your brothers, obviously I've met you guys a number of times, and you're never not doing something, whether it's social media related or talking to people or whatever. So, super commendable for, the drive and the continued drive, right? Because obviously doing this stuff in COVID is not easy because you're just locked in rooms, and, luckily you and your brothers were in the same room or same house essentially. So let's talk a little about that first kind of year. How well did the business do? Obviously you're starting to make some money, I would imagine, which was the kind of, starting point for you guys to think about, quitting school and, doing this full time. So maybe walk us through maybe that first year and some of the wins and losses and all of that.
Yeah. So it took us a while to get our first deal under contract. It took us about 6 months of cold calling lots of people, but you learn a lot through that. Obviously, I think the number one takeaway was being able to overcome the fear of rejection, which is something that really you can get better at. I feel like if you're not, it's like a muscle. If you're not using it every day, then it goes away. So that's the one skill that we took away from that. After 6 months, we had tried locking up a few other deals that fell out, and we actually lost money on one. It was an earnest money deposit that we lost. And obviously you just keep moving. At that point, we were actually about, I want to say like seven grand in credit card debt.
Okay.
List of data. So people might ask if we started with money. No, it was probably not a good idea. I don't recommend it, but at that point we were too deep.
You're betting on yourself and you're betting big. So that's, that's commendable for sure.
Yeah. So like seven grand in debt, and eventually closed on our first deal. That one made us that was the biggest deal we did ever before, like this year, in regards to the amount that we got up front. It was about 30 grand. So that was pretty good. And we started doing more deals. I think that first year we netted a little bit over, we didn't net, we grossed over 100 grand, which was good for us.
Yeah.
Eventually we start realizing that we're investing so much money back into the business that we're not really profiting a lot. So that's one flaw to the wholesale business, in my opinion, is it's such a highly intensive marketing, expense that you're having to put back into your company. So that was one reason why we didn't love that business model, but we learned a lot from it and eventually transitioned a little bit.
Got it. Well, I want to kind of talk more about that transition and then also dig into kind of how you and your brothers kind of divide and conquer. Before we jump into that, we're going to take a quick sponsor break. So we'll be right back.
Whether you're trying to hire a full-time employee or a contractor to fill a gap, Hire Tomorrow can help. Hire Tomorrow is a boutique recruitment firm that has successfully filled sales and marketing, human resources, and technology positions with companies ranging from startups to Fortune 500. If you're struggling to find the right talent, check out hiretomorrow.com or reach out to recruiting@hiretomorrow.com to see how they can help.
All right, we are back on the Work Hard, Invest Harder podcast with Jeffrey Donis. And so, before the break, we kind of learned about your journey and the why that you and your brother started, kind of your investing journey and actually ended up quitting college together to kind of really go full time into real estate. So we talked a little bit about the wholesaling side of your business and kind of what got you started. Now let's talk about kind of the transition to bigger deals. Like, why did you want to go outside of the wholesaling kind of engine and then kind of start into multifamily? And was it a kind of a hard transition? Meaning, did you stop the wholesaling and just put all your effort into multifamily? Or was it kind of one of your brothers still did wholesaling to kind of keep some cash coming in? How did that transition work?
Yeah, and a lot of learning lessons I realized recently looking back. But initially we knew that wholesaling was really a marketing and a sales company, which is awesome. But we wanted to be investors, so we weren't actually acquiring as many units and obviously building wealth through the company. So we learned about syndication. It kind of was something that we were attracted to because you didn't obviously need to use all of your own money to be able to buy these large deals.
Yep.
We could get some sweat equity, which is exactly what we ended up doing. So after having some profits, we actually transitioned and found a mastermind group. We read a few books, like the Best Ever Real Estate Investing book or advice by Joe Fairless, which is a big one in the space. And in the book, we learned a few different foundational, pieces of information that propelled us into the syndication space, like finding a mentor and having someone you can partner with. So that's what led us to think Multifamily, which is a mastermind group that mainly only deals with apartment syndications. Once we joined that group, that's when we started really treating the syndication space as a business, because we have 3 people and there's certain roles that entice or come that are there in a syndication company that we were trying to grow. So I do the investor relations and capital raising. My twin brother does our marketing. So we have like a podcast, newsletters, websites, social media content that helps us attract investors and nurture the ones that have already invested. And then my older brother does our acquisitions and also asset management.
So, I guess, how did you guys decide who does what, right? Because obviously maybe one of you has strengths. Like, how did you kind of make that determination of like, okay, I'm going to focus on this? And, and also how do you kind of stay out of everybody else's swim lane? Because, right. I need your underwriting and, so how do you kind of like, manage the business amongst the three of you?
Yeah. So with the marketing piece, it's really hand in hand with what I do in regards to raising money. But to go back before, when we first got started, I was already doing sales for our previous business. So that was an easy transition for me into the capital raising piece.
Yeah.
Really for me, building relationships and nurturing the ones that we have. My older brother was the one, my twin brother tried to do underwriting and he just didn't really like it. And my older brother, Kenneth, he tried it and really was the one that was willing to do it and learn. He actually enjoyed it as well because for our group, the one that was underwriting was going to be the one actually going out and looking at the property themselves. And he likes to do that. So that's how we sort of finally found our rules within our company. And we don't really fight. And typically I don't enjoy doing what he does. He doesn't enjoy doing what I do, vice versa for the other two. So that's how we kind of stay out of each other's sort of space. But when it comes to working together, I understand the underwriting to a certain extent, where I can look at it. And if I think he's being too aggressive, for example, I'm like, I question him about it. At the end of the day, I have to be able to understand it because I have to obviously sell people on it. So I think there's a good balance there. And I think it's important for everyone who's raising capital to truly understand the underwriting. Maybe you're not the one doing it, but as long as you can look at it and explain it to someone to a pretty good level, I think that should be good.
Yeah, I think that's so important because especially if you're a passive investor and, maybe you're listening to this and you're like, I want to get involved and, but I don't know how to underwrite deals. There's a lot of jargon that goes along with multifamily, that's a lot more complicated, frankly, than, trying to analyze a single family house, right? For example. So yeah, I think just, you need to make sure that if you're passively investing in a deal, you need to be very confident that that person that's bringing you the deal, whether they're the one that found it or not, understands the underwriting and can kind of vouch for the person that actually did the underwriting because, raising capital is one thing, but you need to be able to stand behind that deal because you're putting other people's money, into it. And, normally you're probably investing alongside of your investors, but even if you're not, I'm very much more cautious about other people's money than I'm with my own. So it's one of those things I want to make sure I double and triple check to make sure I feel comfortable before I bring a deal to any of my investors. So I'm sure you're the same. And to your point, you don't need to be the underwriter as long as you trust your brother or whoever in the group that you're kind of raising money for. You trust that they've, done their diligence on the underwriting, right? I think that's a massive piece.
Yeah. And to add on to that, I think the most important thing, because numbers I've learned over the last few years that we've been in this space, they're not all, I wouldn't say subjective, but it's like an art, right? So it can vary depending on who's underwriting. The number you come out to could look different, and it all comes down to, in my opinion, who you're working with and who you're partnering with. Yeah. So not only understanding what their values are, but also what their track record is, and maybe if they've gone through certain downturns, just seeing how they reacted, how they performed. So I think all of those things are important to keep in mind.
Yeah. At the end of the day, it's an Excel document that can be manipulated, right? So you can make any deal look amazing, depending on how aggressive you want to be on your underwriting. And, obviously nobody anticipated the market doing what it's done over the last 12 to 18 months with interest rates going through the roof. So I think to your point, if you can come through this period of multifamily and real estate interest rate, going up, that's going to help build your track record, right? Because if you haven't, at the very least, haven't lost anybody's capital, that's going to bode well as we come out of this and move into, potentially a more stable, normal market. So I want to kind of dig in a little bit around, you mentioned, I think you were in 5 or 6 deals. Is that right?
Yeah, 5.
Okay, 5 deals. And I guess how many of those, it sounds like, I think you led one as kind of like you guys found it. So before, that wasn't your first deal, right? You co-GP'd or helped other people before you found that first one. Is that right?
Correct. The first 4 were co-GPs.
So talk about kind of that first deal that you were a co-GP on. Where was it? How did you kind of get involved with it? And then we'll unpack the one that you guys found.
Yeah. So the first one was in Jacksonville, Florida. So after joining Think Multifamily, it opened a lot of doors, deal flow, relationships with different other co-GPs that we'd use on future deals, partnerships with lead sponsors that we ended up partnering with, and obviously a lot of education. So once we opened and joined that group, we were able to now network with people that were having success finding deals. And I think the best thing that we did, and I'm glad we did it, was partner with other more experienced people when we first got started. So that one was over 100 units. We found it through a lead sponsor in the group, and it's a C-class property built in the 70s. I'd say pretty standard value add strategy, and where we're going in, renovating about 70% of the units, adding different amenities like a improved playground. Mainly on that one was the operational play and improvements that we've been doing there. Currently with what we're doing. So on all the deals that we're co-GPs on, we're not necessarily getting paid to do asset management, but I'm pretty active in regards to being there in Jacksonville. So we're going to all the properties that we're on once or twice a year. We're on all the calls. And obviously we did other things like on the front end, there were some marketing pieces that we helped create, keeping investors updated. And we also had some investors on that one. So just try to bring as much value as we can to the team. At the beginning, obviously our ability to do that was limited, but over time it's grown, and that's what led us and propelled us into the 5th deal that we led.
Got it. And so that first deal, you kind of were kind of giving some sweat equity, right? Kind of helping with some marketing. And then it sounds like you brought some investors into that deal as well. Is that right?
Yeah.
I'm curious if you were able to kind of transition any investors or any people that you met through your wholesaling business into being passive into the multifamily space. Cause I feel like, the wholesaling is very much a cash intensive. It's almost like flipping houses, right? You get you invest money short term, you get typically a big pop in cash. You got to pay a bunch of taxes on that. Whereas, passive investing is literally just, here's money, and then hopefully it comes back with some friends in, a few years. So, how did you kind of start to build your investor database is maybe a better, broader question.
Yeah. So unfortunately, we tried talking to different partners, but as an active investor, you think differently. So that's what I was talking to. And a lot of them can make 30-40% of their money in 6 months if they're fix and flipping, So we're investigating into the wholesale company. But the way that we found our investors was by going and networking at events, whether that was multifamily events. I know people say not to go to those to find investors, but it's a great place to network with other operators. And a lot of times you'll find a person that will eventually invest with you. We also have a podcast like you do, and on social media all over the place. So through all that content, we've generated a lot of different investor leads that we've added to our network, and then referrals, right? Naturally, organically, we've grown our investor network over time. But unfortunately, we haven't gotten many active people from our past business into any of these deals.
Yeah, no, I think it's probably similar to try to convincing people that are maybe W-2 workers that have historically only invested in the stock market or their 401k to, invest passively in real estate. It's, you've got to explain to them why it potentially is better or more advantageous for them. And it's not as easy as we would think it would be, because we've made the transition, right? We've converted to being multifamily, investors, and being very focused on that kind of on a day-to-day basis. So, all right, let's talk about the big one. Let's talk about your deal. How did you guys find it? Obviously, I was kind of aware of the deal in the group, but I'm just kind of curious, kind of the process. So talk us through it. Where was it? How did you find it? And what's been going on since you acquired it? Yeah.
So this one, my brother was reaching out to a broker, and he had submitted an LOI with the broker in the past. I want to say a week before this one came front top of mind, or the broker reached out about it. But we initially had lost out on that one. I believe we made best and final and ended up losing. And then the next week he said, hey, I have another one coming up. This one is currently under contract with another buyer, but it most likely will fall out of contract. So I guess you could have considered it a pocket listing.
Yeah.
And they reached out, sent over financials. We went and toured it. To make a long story short, it ended up penciling out. So we ended up submitting an offer on it. I want to say it was a little north of 20 million. And we eventually got under contract. There was a lot of back and forth through the PSA because that was actually in May that we got it under LOI, and it was
2022
last year. Yes.
Yeah.
So the rate.
That's right as interest rates were starting to go up, right? It was kind of in that period because, my wife and I bought a house in Texas in July, and so we bought it in June, but like that's when interest rates were starting to wrap it up or ratchet up. So anyway, keep going. Yeah,
and it was tough. There was obviously a lot of fear. We weren't always certain if we should go for it, not because we didn't think it was a great deal, but that one was a little bit older of a vintage and it was a Class C deal. So I'm sure people that are just turned off by that. On top of it, it was a pretty large raise just for my brothers and I to take on for our first deal as a lead sponsor, which is probably the biggest thing that we were fearful of, but obviously worked out. And to go back into it, we ended up getting under contract. That takes you through the DD. Everything went well. Through that process, obviously the Fed was raising interest rates and there was a lot of fear. Debt markets were going crazy. So they still are kind of crazy, right? But in the beginning, it was probably a lot more scary because you had no idea where it was going.
Right.
And we were right at the beginning of that cycle. So eventually we were actually able to reduce the purchase price $2 million, which was awesome. And we had a lot of leverage to be able to do that.
Yeah.
We had to add some more earnest money and put more on the line. So it was like, it wasn't a complete 100% win for us, but we took it, moved forward, eventually got the deal closed. It's a little under 200 units, as I mentioned, north of 20 million total purchase price. And it's south of Atlanta. So really good market. Currently, things are going well. There's certain issues with the delinquency on the property because of the county that it's in. They had over 12,000 evictions filed after COVID.
Yeah.
So big backlog on it. And that's something that we're pushing through. I think we expect there to be issues and maybe not in this exact way, but we're getting creative with the solutions. I think that's what us as operators are supposed to do, right? So doing cash for keys and a balance forgiveness and looking out at different programs that Atlanta offers residents, but some we'll just have to wait and see if we can unfortunately take through the eviction process. But things are overall going well. We've been executing our business plan timely, renovating about 4 to 5 units a month. We have this burnt down building that we're doing permits for. So that was already burnt before we took over.
So you were aware that didn't happen in the first handful of months of ownership. That's good.
100%. And then we've pretty much added all of our exterior CapEx items and amenities have all been added. So now we're just turning units and focused on increasing occupancy.
Got it. When did you guys end up closing on that one?
November of 2020.
Got it. So you were kind of right in the height of the massive kind of like unknown of interest rates going up and not knowing how high. And obviously, rate caps weren't really being talked about too much and all of that fun stuff. So there's a lot of, you guys bought at a kind of interesting time. And so I think if you guys can continue to operate effectively, obviously you should come out relatively unscathed. It's some of the deals that were purchased, in late 2021, that was when things were still great. Right. And so it's been an interesting kind of last 2 years for multifamily. So I guess as you kind of think about, this year, right, we're recording this in early August, 2023, that deal that you guys got, you've had it for under a year. And so what's your kind of main focus now? Are you still heavy, or your brother, is he still heavy underwriting multifamily? Obviously multifamily has been deals have not been as abundant this year, for sure. I'm guessing transactions are way down. I haven't looked at the latest numbers, but where are you guys focused right now? Like as far as like where you're putting your time and effort? Yeah.
So last I read, I think it's 76% down year over year.
Is that what it is? Yeah. I thought it was over 50. So
which is obviously crazy and we're impacted by that. Obviously, I think we're part of that statistic. So we're looking at deals. We were underwriting more heavily, I would say, Q1 and Q2. And right now, we are just pretty picky on the deals that we'll even look at. We already have criteria that's 1980s vintage or newer, B class, in a 50,000 or higher median household income area. And it has to be near a big city. We look in Atlanta, near Atlanta, and in the Carolinas. I live in Durham, so I'm not far in North Carolina.
Yeah.
Areas. We are still looking, but we also run a single family acquisitions company that fix and flips. So we actually haven't strayed too far away from the wholesaling. It's just now on the back end. We'll raise capital for that. So that's been going very well for us. We've been pumping out, trying to buy 3 to 4 deals a week on that end. And our main focus on the multifamily side also is just to manage the deals that we're already a part of and execute the business plan accordingly.
Yeah, I think right now, and I've said this on other podcasts, I feel like 2023 is like the year of the operator because, deals were saved by a very hot market. If you bought a deal in 2019, 2020, whatever, you could sell it in 21 and, double or triple your investors' money and without really doing much, right? And so I think now if you've bought a deal in the last 2 years, you've got to be really diligent on the asset management and the function and the operations of the property, because that's the only way you're going to be able to get, investors their money back plus a return on that investment. Right. And, I've seen deals outside of the group, that, have had capital calls or recapitalizations. And so, that's, not what you want to be doing, as a general partner on a deal. You want to be, probably pausing distributions, which I'm sure you guys have, to, stabilize the cash flow as much as possible. But really working with the property management company on site to make sure they're doing everything they possibly can to retain good tenants and get, the lower paying ones out so you can get, some higher paying tenants in there. So, no, it makes sense. And I think you're right. I'm kind of in the same way. I've been doing a little bit of underwriting this year, but there's still a big delta between what sellers want. They still want a bit of a premium, kind of like it is 2021 still. But you just can't get that higher price in this, interest rate market. So, what's your kind of take on kind of where you think the rest of this year and, maybe early 24 is going to go, and maybe your brother's a little closer to it because he does a lot more of the underwriting, but just kind of curious kind of what your take is on, do you think now is a good buying time, if you can find a good deal, or are you kind of like, we're just going to wait till next year, or some people are saying survive till 25 and all that stuff. So.
Yeah, no, I think it's an awesome question. I'm happy that you ask. I think I like to take a multifaceted approach where it's hard to just give one simple answer. I think it depends on a lot of different factors, obviously deal by deal basis, but to be more specific, it depends on the debt that you're going to be using on that property, right? If it's, I've heard different arguments and trains of thought where some people will even shy away, surprisingly, from a low interest rate assumption loan, because if you're buying it today, and it depends on when that expires, because if you're buying it today and let's say you have to eventually exit into or I guess not exit, but maybe refinance, or you might be forced to sell if you can't cash flow at the current interest rates that you're going into, whatever that exit or refi would be. So that's something that we'll keep in mind. I think since interest rates are projected to come down for the rest of this year and won't most likely based on the projections that the Fed is putting out there until maybe Q2 of next year, 2024. I don't know. I think it depends on where you're looking at deals. For me nowadays, I think prices are so high on a cost basis perspective that I am typically staying strict to my criteria. So we're not looking at anything bigger than 150 units. First, it's got to be a B-class asset in those different boxes that we like to check that I mentioned earlier. And as long as it hits that, we also like to see it. Does this make sense at a cost basis standpoint where do I feel like I could exit this in 5 to 6 years at the exit price that I'm projected to exit at based on my underwriting, right? So that's something that in the past, I was looking at a lot of deals and a lot of different opportunities that came across that we'd have to exit, Class C 1970s build at close to 200 grand a door.
Yeah.
Which, it could happen, but that just seems really expensive to me. So right now I'd like to be closer to 100 grand. Obviously it depends on the market, but in the areas I'm looking at, if I can be under that, that is starting to be not only where I'm seeing deals trade, and by me, I mean my brother, but where I would feel comfortable paying because I have to keep that exit in mind. So if I had to give you a simple answer, I think right now you just have to be really careful with what you're buying. I do think multifamily, unfortunately, I don't see things turning around quickly. We all know real estate is sticky and isn't as fluid and volatile as a stock market in both directions. Right? It won't come down fast, but it will go down slow. So I do think it still has some way to go on the downside. So I'm not going to say it's a falling knife, But I do think if it cash flows and you're buying at a good cost basis and you can lock in some type of long-term debt, then it's a good opportunity, but that's hard to find right now.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think I've even been kind of a little bit more stringent on my requirements, right? That location primarily, I'm in Austin, so, I like the Texas market, but, I like the Carolinas, I like Georgia. I'm shying away from Florida from a interest rate or an insurance perspective, just seeing that go through the roof. So yeah, I think if you can find a deal that pencils right now, like you said, with good long-term debt, it should be a really good deal, because if you do need to refinance in a few years, you're likely going to refinance into a lower interest rate than what you got. So I'm still looking, but being much more picky than I used to be, for sure, especially back 2 years ago. So I'm curious, you said you have a fix and flip business. What is that? And what do you guys, are you fixing and flipping houses, or how does that work?
Yeah, so it's interesting. The roles don't shift too much, but Kenneth, my older brother, does our construction management, and that consists of what it sounds like. He'll manage the contractors. We don't do the work ourselves, obviously, or maybe not too obvious, but I do the acquisition end of it, where I'm networking with wholesalers and different agents and getting deal flow, and then I'll go and raise the capital for it. So we are raising debt on these deals, and my twin brother really just, I guess, it doesn't really play too big of a role in this company because his marketing skills just help bring in more investors. But that's pretty much what we do, is looking to do 3 to 4 a week. So
where are you guys buying these deals?
All in North Carolina. We have 3 markets. One is called the Triad, includes Winston-Salem, Greensboro, and High Point. And then near Durham, Raleigh, within probably an hour away from Raleigh. And then also Fayetteville, which is where Fort Bragg, or Fort Liberty, as it's now known, is located.
Got it. So you guys are transacting 3 to 4 deals a week. So you have how many flips going on at any one given time? I mean, it's got to be a number of.
Yeah. So the goal is to do 3 to 4. We've been hitting that over the last 2 weeks. It is hard to find 3 to 4 a week, believe it or not. And obviously you can get pretty tied up on your capital. So with that being said, right now we have 10. We have 11. We just sold 1. So that was now putting us to 10 going on. Not all are obviously going or are in the same phase.
Right.
So we have 3 going through renovation. 1 is on the market. 1 is about to go on market tomorrow. And then the rest haven't closed. We're just under contract. So they're all in different stages.
And I'm assuming these are older / existing homes where the inventory for those types of assets is low right now, like lower than it usually is, just given that there's a lot of people that bought houses, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 years ago in like 2 to 3% interest rates, where they're never going to be able to really get an interest rate like that for a very long time, likely. So how are you guys finding enough deal flow that makes sense that you can then turn around and flip it, given that you're going to probably sell it to a person looking for their primary residence and getting a mortgage on that, right? I'm assuming who your buyer is.
Correct. Yeah. So in regards to how we're finding it, wholesalers, there's obviously, I don't know how to compare it to the past few years. I want to say obviously deal flow has to be lower overall, but as you mentioned, there's a low inventory and all the demand has gone down. I think there's this sentiment that is starting to finally, in a lot of the buyer pool, people that are looking to buy homes, they're finally starting to realize that homes and interest rates are not going to probably come down to that historic low that it was over the last few years. So it might come down to 5, right, eventually, and maybe they'll stick around there or come back down lower. I'm not really trying to predict that, but I just do look at the markets that I'm in. How quick are the houses selling? I know there's no inventory to start. Right. People for our product, we're typically going under what the median average income in regards to what an individual makes in our markets can afford, which tends to be around $350,000. So if I'm under that, my buyer pool is pretty big. So there's a lot for our product. And in regards to the days on market right now, on average, I mean, we're not even listed for 7 days before we get an offer. So it's going pretty quickly. And deal flow obviously could be better, but I think as the Fed starts to get towards the end of their hiking cycle, there will only be more and more people coming to market in regards to buyers. See that stabilization.
Yeah, I would say, I would imagine that your buyer pool is pretty big in the sense that once you get a house, if you can get it under contract, my guess was just your inventory coming in the door is lower than, but yeah, I imagine if you have a fully turnkey house that's flipped, that's in good condition, that, a massive amounts of people can afford, then yeah, you're probably going to be able to sell that pretty quickly. So that's pretty awesome. So, before we wrap up here, I want to get your sentiment, because you're talking mostly to investors, right? Like that's part of your main role is investor relations and raising money. So what are your investors thinking about or talking about or asking you about when you reach out to them about, hey, and I'm sure you're kind of keeping constant communication with them, whether it's email or phone calls, but if you found a multifamily deal, how many percentage-wise of your investors are kind of willing and able to kind of invest? Because I'm just trying to get a sense of what you're hearing in the market from a passive investor standpoint of like, hey, are they on the sidelines? Are they ready? Like, what's that look like?
Yeah. So I think now more than ever, it's all determined based on the team, and a lot of people are more picky overall. So I also think it's relevant that I speak with a lot of people outside of my own network of investors, and a lot of them tend to be operators, where I'll ask them what they're experiencing. A majority, and if not, I'd say 90% of the people that I speak with are struggling to raise capital right now, because at first, over the last few months, it was because of the interest rates and also the economy and the pending recession, right? We don't really know if we'll go into one, but a lot of people just want to wait it out and see. Now, I've also spoken with a lot of people that have this pent-up demand of investor, liquidity that is looking to get placed. And money will always find its home somewhere. So I like to think that's better. And, I think I'm a good steward of people's capital. So I'm still talking to my investors and trying to raise money. And it has been more difficult on certain projects. When you ask me about multifamily, overall, I think multifamily is a scary place for a lot of investors right now because of the uncertainty. If you look up commercial real estate, first, a lot of news outlets don't really do a good job of being, separating what
they lump it all together.
Exactly. First and foremost, but multifamily now has been more and more, I guess, in the headlines, and it's not always in a positive way that they're being described, and it's being described. So a lot of people are a little scared. My investors specifically are a little scared to get into multifamily deals, especially given the low yields that they're seeing.
Right.
But surprisingly, they're not even getting that much deal flow right now, which is obvious, right? Not surprising. They are looking. A lot of them are looking for places to put it. They just want to be a little bit more picky, and some of them haven't had the best experience given the environment we're in. A lot of operators are going through some painful times, and they have some deals that aren't doing well. Maybe distribution stopped, or there's capital calls. So they're a little hesitant to get into that. But as I mentioned, I raise money for other things, and I'm not having a problem with that. So it comes to show you that there still is that demand for investors. It just depends on what the asset class is and what the opportunity looks like.
Yeah, no, I think you're smart by having multiple kind of offerings to your investors. Because I guess, are you raising this as a debt fund where they're putting money into a pool and they're getting just some kind of fixed rate return? How does that work?
Yeah, so it's not a debt fund yet. It will be, I'd say, within the next year or two, but probably like 12 to 18 months. But right now, it's just short-term loans based on a deal basis. So large return.
Got it. Interesting. Very cool. Well, Jeffrey, this has been an awesome conversation. I've gotten to learn a lot more about you and your brothers and kind of your roles and responsibilities within your business. So I appreciate that. I do want to kind of wrap us up the way I wrap every conversation up, with a 3-pack of questions. So let's jump right in here. So, what's one piece of advice that got you started or helped you along your real estate investing journey?
For me, I would say everyone's religious and faithful in something. And for me, that's something that is infinite, and that's God. So I think having something that you can sort of not only keep you accountable in business, because obviously it's very easy to make the wrong choice if you're just going after the wrong things. I think that it's important to be grounded in something, especially as obviously we're in the real estate, which can be lucrative. So that's one advice that I wish I had when I first started. I think I would have not done too many things too differently, but it would have been a lot different mindset towards it, and perhaps would be in a better place now.
Got it. Very fair. All right. You've got a lot of books behind you, but what is your favorite real estate or business book that you're into right now?
Reading one called The Billionaire That Wasn't.
Okay.
I don't know who it's by. I just started it like maybe 2 days ago.
That's fine.
So that's one business book. And then do you have another question about another book? Because I have another one that comes to mind.
You can rattle off as many as you want. I like to hear kind of people's books. I'm actually just started reading Who Not How. I've heard that by probably 4 of the last 10 guests that I've had on have talked about Who Not How. So I bit the bullet and started listening to that one.
Awesome. There's a one called Green Lights by Matthew McConaughey.
Oh, I love it.
It's an awesome book. And then one by David Goggins, Can't Hurt Me. I'm sure you've heard that. Winning, Relentless by Tim Grover, the same author on both of those. And then like the big ones like Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill and Outwitting the Devil, all of those, Rich Dad Poor Dad. I've read a lot of Robert Kiyosaki's books. So
yeah,
I think all the big ones you should read.
Yeah. Now, have you listened to David Goggins' new book?
I haven't. I want to though. Is it good?
And did you listen to the first book or did you read it?
I did both.
Okay. Yeah. I definitely recommend if you like David Goggins, I think he's kind of a polarizing person, but if you like it, I highly recommend listening to the Audible books versus reading them, or maybe in addition to, but because there's some extra tidbits from him in there. It's almost like a book podcast all in one. So yeah. I did listen to the second one or the newest one. It's pretty good. So definitely check it out. First? What's that?
Was it better than the first?
That's a good question. It's kind of a carry on. Like they're so good. Like his life is just so crazy that it's like you just didn't realize he did so much crazy, stupid stuff. Yeah, for a second book, right? It's just insane. So yeah, I don't think one's better than the other, but I think they're definitely just super good. So it also makes you feel really lazy when you listen to him and the stuff that he's doing. So yeah. All right, last question here. If you hit your financial freedom number, meaning you could live an amazing life just off of the passive income from your investments, what would you do?
Honestly, that's a great question. I probably wouldn't do much different. Travel more for sure, because I'm at a point where I wake up every day and this is something I'm grateful for. I really love what I do. I think the real wealth for me is the depth of the relationships I have with my family, my friends, and God. So just being able to spend more time in those would be ideal, but also being able to create memories with all the things I just mentioned and people I just mentioned would probably be the ideal way to live it. Right now, I work a lot, but I love what I do. So I think I'm grateful for that and in all those relationships.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, it's great to love what you do because it doesn't feel as much like work. It doesn't feel like it not work, but it definitely feels less like it. And if you have that passive income coming in, you can spend more time with people that you like, as opposed to just grinding away. So, Jeffrey, it's been awesome to connect. How can people get in contact with you, learn about you? If you haven't heard of the Donis brothers, or what's your company name? It's just
Investment Group. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So check them out. They're all over social media. But yeah, what's the best way to get in contact if they want to learn more about multifamily, about this, your fix and flip business, all that?
Yeah. So my awesome brother put together a checklist. You can go to www.donisinvestmentgroup.com/checklist to visit that. It's pretty much just something that you can use to vet different passive investment opportunities. Nice. You can go to that website without the /checklist just to see what our company looks like and what we do. And then we're all over social media at Donis Brothers. I'm at Jeffrey Donis on all platforms. And we have a podcast called The Real Estate Monopoly.
Very cool. Well, man, thank you very much for being on the podcast. It was awesome to get to know you a little bit more than what I already did. So appreciate it.
I appreciate it.
I hope you got value out of this episode of the Work Hard, Invest Harder podcast. Your one-stop shop for education on how you can continue to work hard in your career and have different options to invest even harder. If you took anything away from this episode, please leave a written review. I read every review as it helps me serve you better. If you're listening to this podcast, it means that you want to grow your passive real estate portfolio. The easiest way to do that is to join our investor club by heading to greatventurecapital.com/invest. The link is in the show notes. See you on the next episode.